Hi there, I am Tamika Heiden, the founder of Majykri, an exciting new tool to help you accelerate your impact. Majykri is all about planning for impact, and it uses AI along with 12 years of experience consulting with researchers all around the world to map out your impact along a pathway. It gives you the map, it talks about stakeholders, and ultimately the tool's purpose is to make impact easier, quicker, and more efficient for everyone to think about and brainstorm how best to accelerate your impact. Let's have a walk through. When you first log in to Majykri, you will see your active projects. That's if you have any set up. So as you can see here in my account, I have 3 active projects set up. And over here on the left-hand side, I have my project tags. I can see my active projects here. I can change the way I see those projects into list view or the tablet view. I can see how many credits I have remaining to use in my account. I can then select by tag. If I had a lot of projects in here, I would be able to select just those with a particular tag or just those, with those tags. And once I've finished with projects, I can archive them. Each project can be edited 3 times before you need to use another credit. So if you wish to edit a project, you just go in here and you can rerun the project through Majykri. You can also add notes to the project if you want to remind yourself of something later. You can go back and download the last result that you had, or you can archive the project if you finished with that and you don't need it showing up here in your active projects anymore. Archived projects can be returned to active, and you can always see them in the archived tab. The other thing you can do is go to the notes page to see any projects that have notes quite easily. And you can see here I've just put in a test note. You can also go and buy more credits to use Majykri. And Majykri is a 1 credit, gives you 3 goes at the 1 project. Now let's walk through and create a new project. Okay, so we're going to paste in now the details of our project. And the first thing that we want to do is to paste in the name of the project. So this is just a project that's been proposed through a grant scheme in Australia. So it's come from publicly available information on the website from the Australian Research Council. The description box is purely for you. If you wish to put something in here, you can then put a description so that you know what that project is or anything else that you'd like to put in here. I'm just going to put a description of the project that I've got here. It's an ARC linkage project. Okay, you can choose the language that you want. So British or US English. We're going to go with British English. That's just going to determine how it spells things in our report. Then we go next. And as you go through, you'll notice that on the right-hand side, we have some examples of what we're looking for and good examples and poor examples of the information that you're putting in here. This particular one is where we're going to put the information that shows for the project. This is a very important box because this is where we're putting all of the most important information. So I'm going to copy in some information from that project. So this is the summary that was given with that project, but there is also a national interest test statement that we put with that. And I'd like to just copy in both. So I'm going to also put that here, even though it might be doubling up just a little bit of information. So this gives us what it's planning to do and the information here. Now that we have this information, this should be sufficient for it to plan. So in the next screen, we now get an option to tell it what field or discipline the research belongs to. So for this particular one, it's a microbiology and kind of environmental marine biotechnology project. So we might just put those 2 in just so it has some idea. You don't have to, this is completely optional. The next one is around where the work will be relevant. Is it just going to be locally, regionally? So if you were to choose locally, you would specify where, same with regionally. So we're going to use nationally. Let's say it's going to be Australian because we're talking about seafood, lobster production in Australia. So then we will say next, we're going to look at any existing partnerships. Now, with this one, again, it's optional. You may not have partnerships already, but if you do, here is one place where you can enter in these partnerships, and that guarantees that it will bring up those partners when it's suggesting who you should work with. So for this particular example, we're just going to leave we're going to actually, there's one particular partner that was in our blurb. So we're going to put that in here. So the Australian Bay Lobster Producers is a commercial partner. And so we will put that in here to see if that brings up anything interesting. Now, if we go to the next one, it'll ask us our vision for the project. So what are we hoping our impact will be? Out of this, we don't really have a vision at this point, so this is optional, but it can be really useful to guide the tool to help with what you're hoping impact will be. So now we will just hit next, and it's going to now do the magic. This is where it's going to use AI to select different users based on the information I've put in, and then it's going to suggest those to me. Now, those users, I can then choose up to 8 out of the user groups here and go through and make sure I can select how we do things with them. So this was our commercial partner, so we'll keep that one in. Now, maybe we want to think about the department, a government agency here. And should we look at the farmers themselves? And you can see here so many options. Perhaps environmentally focused policymakers could be an interesting one. It could be useful for other researchers, so maybe marine biologists in the scientific community, and perhaps even lobster exporters as an example. So I haven't picked 8. I don't want to pick 8 because I feel like that's way too many to choose. So once I've done that, I can hit next. But if I don't like these options, I can regenerate and AI will give me different options. But as you can see, the list that it gives you is quite expansive. So now we're going to go next, and it's going to consider for those users I have selected, what is the best way to share the information? What outputs and activities may I create or undertake for each of those users that would be most effective to get the information to them that they need? So it just takes a little bit of time because it's doing all that work in the background. So now these are the groups that I chose. I chose these 6, and for each of them, we're going to go through one at a time and choose how we might select these outputs and activities. So for the lobster producer, we might come up with some guidelines for the probiotics in the production, maybe some cost-benefit analysis as well, because those producers are going to want to know cost. So we can choose up to 5 outputs for each of the groups, but I'm just going to choose a couple. Now, the Department of Agriculture, we may want to do a policy brief for the department and some recommendations for the regulatory framework, since they're going to be able to do those types of activities, and maybe some publications on the impacts, just so they have some backup information. The next group is the lobster aquaculture farmers. So for this particular group, the farmers, we might need to have some user-friendly manuals. We might run, for example, some workshops, and perhaps we could do a tracking tool for producers using probiotics. The next group is the environmentally focused policymakers. And so for these guys, we might do the research papers, some presentations at policy forums, and policy recommendations that we would publish. Marine biologists, the scientific community, definitely peer-reviewed articles, maybe some data sets that could be used, and conference presentations. And finally, the group of lobster exporters. maybe some market analysts reports on the impact of probiotic on lobster quality, maybe some promotional materials, and let's have a look what else we've got here. Some guidelines maybe for best practices in sustainable sourcing. So we don't have to pick 5 for all of them. We don't have to pick any particular number. Again, consider the workload in doing this, but it's just to get the idea so that you can start to map out what a pathway to impact would look like. Now that we've selected that, now because I didn't choose 5 for each of them, this will come up and that's fine. But it just gives you an option in case you've forgot to select something. So then you can say yes and you can continue. Now this is where the mapping will happen. So it's gone out and it's now going to pull it all together. For each user, it's going to map those particular outputs or activities you've selected and tell you what the potential outcomes and impacts would be if you were to go through and do those particular outputs and activities. So as you can see, we've got the users here that we selected, and this is a long table. It gets very long if you've selected a lot of users. We then have those outputs that I selected all through here. We also have the outcomes now. So it's telling us that if we produce guidelines for these Australian Bay lobster producers, the potential outcomes would be improved application of the probiotics for lobster survival rates, and the impacts would be increasing market competitiveness through those sustainably produced lobsters. So another example could be the government agency policy brief. We've increased their awareness and support, and it could potentially lead to enhanced regulatory frameworks. If we were to make recommendations for the frameworks, it could streamline their processes, and that could encourage the adoption of environmentally friendly aquaculture techniques. And you can see that it's done this all the way through. So having a user-friendly manual would make easier adoption of probiotics in daily farming practices, leading to improved overall health in the long term. So these are just mapping pathways through to impact, and it's done that for each of them. Again, if you haven't got answers that you'd like, you can hit regenerate. The other thing you can do here is if you wanted to change any of these, you can just click on it and you can edit the cell. So you can change the wording here, or even of your potential outputs, you can change this wording. So maybe you don't want to call it guidelines, maybe you want to call it documentation, and you just want to change the nuance there, you can. And again, with the impacts, you can edit the impacts as well. So as you go through, you can change any of these if you want. Typically, it's, we're looking at a draft here, so you probably won't have too many things that you want to change there, but the option is there. Then we're going to go next, and now what's going to do is on top of the potential outcomes and impacts, it's going to give us the indicators we might use to measure or assess that impact and some evidence we might need to capture to showcase that impact. So here we can see again for this top one, the impact indicators could be the percentage increase in lobster survival rates post the implementation of these probiotics. And then the sources of evidence would be a performance report showing the survival rate statistics. Cost savings, so that would come from financial reports. Number of policies influenced, so that would be the records of those policies or the names of those policies. Reductions in time could be a measure of probiotic approvals, and that would come from the government timelines to do that. So this just gives you any of these examples of what it is you might. So feedback surveys could be your evidence for lobster farmers adopting these probiotic manuals. Once you've created the manual, they've adopted it. It could have overall health, and then you could have the adoption rates of the probiotic manuals by the farmers, maybe some other measures even here around the healthier stocks or number of stocks, less disease being measured. There's lots of different things that could be included in these indicators. When you know your work, you know these a little bit better, but this starts to give you some of those examples. It's at this point that you can generate your report, but you can also do a stakeholders insight report. So I've selected 6 different stakeholders here, but who are they and how might I best work with them? So this is just a little add-in. You don't have to do this, but we're going to do it for the sake of this demonstration. So the Stakeholders Insight Report is going to generate some insights into how you might work with those stakeholders. So you can see here for each of the stakeholders, we have been given an example needs and expectations. So what do the Australian Bay lobster producers need or expect? Well, they need effective implementation of tailored probiotics to ensure safety. So when you're engaging with them, you should focus on demonstrating practical benefits and addressing concerns about transition from their traditional methods. For the farmers, they might require hands-on workshop and robust support networks. They need easy to implement solutions. For the policymakers, they want to seek evidence of sustainability and data showing improvement without the chemicals, and they're going to be looking for transparent data, case studies, and so on. So you can use this to think about the approach for each of these different groups. And then from there, we can generate the report. So the report now comes out. We've got those stakeholders. We've got the outputs and activities we selected for all of them summarised at the top. We then have the full table here on the document. We then have the stakeholder engagement plan, so some information about working with those stakeholders. So let's download those results, and that will give us a Word document that has that information. So from here, we can just save and exit, and we go back and you can see that report now coming up in our dashboard. We can go into add or edit a note here. So that's the project, and we can add our tags here. So if you've got a tag that's already here, we can put it, or if you've got a new tag, we can use that. So we might use a tag, we might say it's ARC grant, and we might say it's microbiology. So we'll add a new one. Okay, and we've added a new tag. So we've got those two tags, and we'll go save. In the main screen, you'll be able to change the color of the tags to make them individual if you would like to do so. You can see here the ones that show up for ARC grant and the microbiology one being the one we just did. We can go back to show them all. And you'll also notice that the project's only just been set up, so we've just got the one time through. This one's been edited once, 3 times, 2 times, and so on. And that completes our demonstration of Majykri.